first of all, knowledge can be useful in terms of opening us up to possibilities of knowing there is more to life. There is the possibility of awakening, becoming more yourself, whatever you want to call it. So that knowledge is really important as an inspiration, a motivation, and it can direct us towards certain paths and directions. And in that it can be very useful. But there comes a time when you don't need more knowledge, when knowledge actually becomes a barrier. Because what we're talking about when we're talking about spiritual awakening is nothing to do with the mind, it's nothing to do with understanding. And so there comes a time when we have to let go of looking for even more understanding, and it can get in the way because we think, if only I knew this or if only I knew that. But also what tends to happen at the beginning is we have this sort of idea that awakening, or what you want to call it, is something to be achieved, and it's going to be this wonderful, amazing state where everything is different. You're going to see angels or lights around everything, or you're going to be totally transformed. And so we actually, I think even at the beginning, misunderstand the knowledge. And as we continue in our own journey, we begin to see more deeply into what all the great teachers are pointing towards. And it actually gets simpler and simpler, and we begin to see there's something behind all the knowledge that is actually very, very simple. And I know in my experience, there's been many times where it's like, oh, this is what they were talking about. Oh, and it's so obvious. It's so obvious. Why did I make it so complex? So that's another disadvantage of knowledge. We actually make things more complex than they need to be. And in the end, it's about letting go of any seeking, of any wanting. One of my little personal aphorisms is, seek and ye shall not find. The normal one is seek and ye shall find, and that's true in life. The more we seek, the more more likely we are to succeed and find something. But what we're seeking here is actually ourselves. We're seeking our own true nature. We're seeking to be in touch with that sense of I-ness, presence, which is always there. And that's not something you find, it's something you reveal. And by taking away all our thinking, by quietening the mind, you then come to that realization of like, oh, here I am. It's that same me that's been here all my life, but I haven't looked at, I haven't noticed, because my attention has been focused on out there doing something, getting something. Our whole society is about finding something, getting somewhere. And even seeking in oneself a certain state of consciousness is still that doing, wanting mode, which actually gets in the way of you being what it is you're seeking. And so what I find useful is at a certain stage is whenever I find my mind wanting something, seeking something, to just let go of that. Because what we're looking for it's what we already are, it's already there. And I can remember one time some years ago that really brought this home. I was just sitting in my daily meditation and just having this feeling, this isn't as good as other times. This meditation isn't quite so deep, it wasn't so clear, this isn't a, quote, good meditation. And then suddenly realized, hang on, that's just another thought which I'm taking seriously. And when I included that in the present moment, in the present moment, there's me sitting here and there's this thought that this meditation isn't very good. When I included that, everything just opened up. And there I was, sitting in that, what I call the armchair of the self. Just sitting in the armchair of the self, just like, yes. And it was my wanting something that was actually taking me in the opposite direction. The word I like most is actually contentment. But happiness tends to be conditional. Happiness, I'm happy about something. And people often talk about happiness, or you think, if I follow this path, I'm going to be happy. And happiness has this sort of vibrant feeling. What actually comes is a very quiet, delightful state of being. And Again, one of the mistranslations, I think, is Ananda. We hear Satchit Ananda, and so many teachers talk about Ananda, and when you reach this state of consciousness, it's going to be Ananda, which is translated as bliss, or it was translated as bliss by the early European professors who went out to the East. They translated as bliss. The actual word Ananda, from Sanskrit, the long R means great, Ananda means contentment. So the root meaning of Ananda is not bliss, which in our culture is like, some marvelous, ecstatic, euphoric, orgasmic state. It just means great contentment, which means everything is okay. It's that feeling of there's nothing else that needs to be added. There's nothing missing. There's no substance to the state. There's no substance to it. But there's just this deep feeling of this is deeply okay. This is what I've been looking for in all my life, this deep sense of okayness, deep contentment. And there's joy in that. There's just joy is how that sort of, it's a natural expression of that. You just feel, how could you not feel joy about just feeling so deeply at ease and content? Yeah, yes. And that's because there's a sense of aha, and often a sense of relief, the letting go of what you're holding on to, whether it's the thinking or the ego mind, whatever you want to call it, which is always constraining. It's always holding us back in one way or another, and it's creating tension in the mind. Whenever we're in the ego mind or the ego, there's a tension in the mind. And when we let go of that release of that tension, there's a sense of relief, and it's like, But then that's the doorway, and then it's sinking into just resting in the self. After enlightenment, you still have to do the laundry. Life continues. I mean, the Dalai Lama, somebody asked the Dalai Lama, do you ever get angry? He said, yes, but I don't hold on to it. That's the difference. If we just hold on to, I'm so angry about what this person said 6 months ago, I can't forgive them. All we're doing is hurting ourselves. So yes, we have emotions, we have ups and downs, and we have a life. We need to get on with living our life. And sometimes the people we're interacting with are, being stupid or whatever, or by our judgment. So life continues in a way just as before, except now you are not driven by the needs of the ego mind. That basically the way I define the ego mind is it's that way of thinking that says, if I just get things right, if I just get the world right, if I just get people to behave to me the way I want them to behave, if I just get everything in the world right, I'll be happy, I'll be at peace. And that's what drives the world crazy, because it doesn't work. It works in the short term, but it doesn't really work long term. And if you let go of that, and you're resting in this sense of just, then when you're called to do something in the world, you're just called to, this needs doing, that person needs help, I need to feed myself, whatever it is. Your action is what is often called spontaneous right action. It's spontaneous. It doesn't come through thinking. Sometimes you need to think and work it out, but often just that natural daily living, just like, this needs doing, that needs doing. So you're just as engaged in the world, but it's not coming from a place of inner psychological lack or inner psychological need. It's just coming from a natural, spontaneous place of just knowing who you are, and then from that context, getting on with life. I remember at a talk I was at recently, someone was saying, I'm so, I understand, but I'm so scared of losing myself. I'm so scared I can't do this. And it's like, I said, okay, supposing this were to happen, supposing you were to lose your ego, and there you were totally lost and fearful, scared, would you still be there observing the fear? Would you be observing that? And they said, well, yes. So you haven't gone at all. They think, people confuse, and this is what it's all about really, they confuse that sense of inner I-ness, that sense of being, which is there all our life. That gets confused with the individual ego mind, which is the thinking mind, which is trying to work things out and keep control of things. The ego mind is basically about trying to keep us safe. And when that goes, we realized that the two had got mixed up. that the ego mind had got mixed up with this sense of being, and we thought it was the same. And when the ego mind dissolves, that sense of being me is still there, and it's clean, and it's never a fearsome state. Sometimes the dropping away, or as you say, the transparency, when that begins to happen, that can feel fearful because you think you're losing control and you don't know where you're going. But when you're there, it's like, how could I ever fear this? This is delicious. What was I worried about? And I am still here. I am still exactly the same I that was worried stiff about losing my ego. That same I is now here saying, this is delicious. Nothing's changed. Yep, that's one of my things, is don't take it too seriously. I remember when I was 7 years old, we have these, I don't know if you have them in Italy, but these Christmas crackers where you pull something and out comes a little piece of paper with a little saying on it. And it said, don't take life too seriously, you'll never get out alive. And it just struck me. Yeah, and it's the taking things seriously, that's the ego mind. And that's its job. The ego mind has a job, and that is to, as I say, keep us safe, and it needs to take things seriously when it has a job to do. So if there's, if something's about to happen, it's about to pour with rain, say I need to get some better clothes, I need to take that seriously for a moment. But what happens is we get caught in that taking things seriously all the time, and so we take everything seriously when most of the time we don't need to. But it's an important point. The ego mind still has a role. It still comes in when it's needed, but only when it's needed.